We've sent rovers to Mars, begun mapping the ocean floor, and are now using AI to unlock ancient languages. So why are there still places here on Earth no one's allowed to explore? Some say it's to protect the past. Others think we're hiding something. Either way, I'm Mike with List 25, and I've found 25 of the most secretive, dangerous, and heavily guarded archaeological sites on Earth, starting with some ancient cave paintings we were destroying by simply breathing on them. If you want to see great art, you go to an art gallery, not the dark corner of a dangerous cave. But in 1940, 4 French teens did the exact opposite. Chasing after a friend's dog that had disappeared into a hole beneath an uprooted tree, they stumbled into an underground gallery filled with over 600 vivid wall paintings, created by humans more than 17,000 years ago. This was the Lascaux Caves. Soon, crowds were lining up to see the prehistoric masterpieces and stories left behind by our distant ancestors. But there was one problem. We were destroying it. The carbon dioxide in human breath, along with heat and fungi from our sweaty presence, started damaging the ancient pigments. So, just 23 years after opening to the public, the caves were permanently sealed in 1963. To this day, the Lascaux Caves are still off limits, strictly reserved for a handful of scientists. The rest of us were given a replica. A pretty good one, sure, but still a copy of the original Stone Age gallery. And speaking of underground mysteries, let's look at another one. You know the dead should be left in place, right? Well, Emperor Qin Shi Huang took that to the next level by posting an army of thousands of clay soldiers to stand watch at his gravesite. So in 2010 BCE, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China, was laid to rest in the largest tomb in Chinese history. But this wasn't just any royal grave. It was an underground kingdom, reportedly meant to mirror the ancient capital city, Xianyang. The tomb is surrounded by the famous terracotta warriors and their horses, chariots, and weapons. It was discovered in 1974, and excavation quickly started. But then the actual burial chamber is still untouched. Well, this is because scientists are terrified of destroying it. We've sent people to the moon, yet we still don't have the tech to explore this tomb without risking irreversible damage. For now, the Emperor rests undisturbed, and the rest of us, strictly kept out. When you think of ancient Rome, you probably picture Julius Caesar, gladiators, and grand columns. But there's another site still carrying Rome's legacy, Leptis Magna. This ancient city, located on the Libyan coast, was part of Roman history. It was first established as a Punic settlement before 500 BCE. It flourished under Emperor Septimius Severus. But after centuries of wars and invasions, it was abandoned around 647 CE, buried under dust and sand. That is, until 1920, when Italian archaeologists uncovered it. When excavations started, lots of stunning structures were discovered. There was also a warrior battling a deer, 4 men wrestling a wild bull, and a gladiator catching a break after slaying his opponent. Leptis Magna is off-limits to tourists. Due to political instability and violence in Libya, access is restricted, with only select tours or research teams allowed in. So, unless you're packing a press badge and body armor, Leptis Magna will have to stay on your ancient bucket list. But sadly, it's not the only location folks are robbed of experiencing because of political instability. Here's another one. Back in 321 BCE, just 2 years after Alexander the Great's death, his empire was basically in chaos. All his generals were scrambling for control. Seleucus somehow managed to win in 312 BCE and promptly founded the Seleucid Empire. This was when Hatra was born, an important city that flourished as a religious center under the Seleucid rule in the 3rd or 2nd century BCE. But, as always, wars eventually caught up with it. Legend has it that Al-Nadira, the king's daughter, betrayed her city, allowing Shapur to conquer it, kill the king, and marry her. When Hatra was later discovered by German archaeologists in 1907, it turned out to be one of the best preserved Parthian cities, complete with temples and statues. However, due to the ongoing conflicts in Iraq, Hatra is off limits to anyone but the bravest researchers. It's been looted severely, and in 2015, videos surfaced of ISIS destroying statues and structures. And so, currently, curious tourists are prevented from finding out what's left of what Seleucus had started. Pyramids aren't only an Egyptian thing, The Putupicha Empire had its own fair share of them. And okay, maybe they don't quite match the grand resting places of Egyptian pharaohs, but this ancient city still delivered. Ceremonial plazas, stone pyramids, and yakatas, those cool semicircular temple platforms. It even had what archaeologists think was an astronomical observatory. So yeah, not bad at all. The Ihuatzio site is basically a throwback to the Purépecha Empire. These guys were one of the few civilizations that managed to resist the mighty Aztecs. And Ihuatzio? That was one of their major strongholds. A lot of tourists still pour in to explore what's left of it. But then, well, sorry to disappoint, a big chunk of Ihuatzio is still forbidden. While spots like the Plaza de Armas are open, the rest? Off limits. Most of the site hasn't been excavated yet, and after a pyramid partially collapsed in 2024 from heavy rains, things got even tighter. For now, it's a waiting game. But there's also another forbidden pyramid site in Mexico. So back in 2007, it was time to update the list of the 7 wonders of the world. And guess who made the cut? Chichen Itza and its famous El Castillo pyramid. This castle, dedicated to the feathered serpent god Kukulkan, has fascinated thousands of folks through the years. But here's a fun fact. It has 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. It's pretty fascinating, right? But if you were planning to climb the pyramid, well, you're out of luck. In 2006, a woman tragically fell to her death while climbing, and because of this, well, it's been banned ever since. No one's allowed to get too close anymore. While you can still visit the ruins and enjoy the view of El Castillo, the top of the pyramid is off limits. The climbing ban also shut off access to the throne room inside, so tourists now have to imagine how it looks from the ground. 9 times out of 10, the Eiffel Tower and its romantic vibes come to mind whenever we picture Paris. But there's something else you need to know. Right under the streets of Paris is a network of underground galleries and tunnels known as the Paris Catacombs. It was built in the late 18th century to house the remains of destroyed tombs during the expansion of the city. Now, the catacombs are, of course, a pretty fascinating sight, so millions of visitors show up every year. But sadly for them, only about 1% of the entire underground network is open to the public. Not every tourist is satisfied with this, and sometimes they go snooping around the insides of the catacombs using secret entrances like the sewers. But do not get any ideas. It's illegal, and you'll face a fine if you get caught. Not to mention, incredibly dangerous. People get lost down there. You know how they say you should learn from your mistakes? Well, France did just that. The Chauvet Cave is another underground ancient gallery with hundreds of prehistoric artworks decorating its walls for over 36,000 years. But while the cave is renowned, it is completely off limits to tourists. Why? Well, after what happened with Lascaux, the French learned from their mistakes and shut the doors of the Chauvet Cave to visitors so it wouldn't suffer the same fate. It might sound harsh, but in my opinion, it makes sense, and it's pretty necessary. So only official scientists are allowed to go in there and to work on the art pieces. North Korea as a country is already very strict with letting visitors in, let alone having someone wander around a site like the complex of Koguryo Tombs. Now, the complex of Koguryo Tombs goes as far back as the, fittingly, Koguryo Kingdom, which ruled parts of China and Korea between the 3rd century BCE and 7th century CE. This massive burial site has over 10,000 tombs, with really impressive wall paintings that show off royal life. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, alright, but getting a peek is almost impossible. Given how North Korea isn't really high on a spot for tourism, this ancient treasure remains pretty much off limits. This is one of the longest caves in Canada, and ironically, not a castle or a guard in sight. Castle Guard Cave is just good old limestone, but it's anything but ordinary. Hidden deep beneath the icy spine of the Rocky Mountains, Castle Guard Cave stretches over 20 kilometers under Alberta's Banff National Park. Now, most northern caves aren't exactly known for flashy formations, but Castle Guard said, "Hold my stalactite." Some parts shine with flowstone, rare cubic pearls, and soda straws so perfect they look almost man-made. It's also the only cave in North America under a glacier, and its back passages are sealed off by thick plugs of ice, a literal frozen dead end. But this isn't your average spelunking destination. Access is strictly limited to scientific researchers, and for good reason. The environment is ridiculously fragile and easy to wreck with even the smallest misstep. So curious folks have to stick to documentary episodes and science blogs. Moving on, we go from ice to a little portal to hell. No one really expects that when you build statues or monuments for ancient gods, they'd take it a little too seriously. Well, Pluto sure did, and his gate to hell in Turkey is kind of proof of that. It was built in the 2nd century BCE in the city of Hierapolis and dedicated to the Roman god of the underworld. The site was discovered in 2013, and it lives up to its name. The cave beneath releases toxic gases that are so deadly that birds that fly too close literally drop dead, dragged to the underworld. So the Turkish government banned visitors from getting too close because of the danger. So while the site is fascinating from a distance, you might want to keep said distance, unless you're up for a literal meet and greet with Pluto. And not the dog from Disney. I've done those before. What a great pup. In 1957, archaeologists stumbled upon something wild in the middle of nowhere. A 65-meter brick minaret just chilling in a remote Afghan valley. Now, this wasn't some half-finished project either. I'm talking full-on decorative glory, complete with Kufic calligraphy and geometric designs that still leave jaws dropping centuries later. The Minaret of Jam was built in the 1100s during the Ghurid Empire and is believed to be all that's left of the ancient city of Firozkoh. You can think of it as Afghan's answer to a medieval skyscraper, but prettier. So why haven't you seen travel influencers posing in front of it? Well, this is another one of those look but don't touch sites. The location is insanely remote, tucked away in rugged mountain terrain. But that's just the beginning. Years of seasonal flooding have also eaten away at the base, leaving the minaret dangerously close to collapse. On top of that, political instability in the region has turned this ancient marvel into a complete no-go zone. But since I've mentioned floodwaters, let's move on to the sea. Ever wonder what you find while digging around London? Maybe a few coins, an old bottle, or, surprise, 4 medieval ships? Well, in the 60s, that's exactly what happened. Some workers digging near Blackfriars stumbled upon 4 medieval ships well hidden beneath the Thames. These were a bunch of long-lost vessels dating back to the 14th century. Now this is where it gets interesting. The Blackfriars shipwrecks, as they're called, aren't your average shipwrecks. They reveal a snapshot of London's maritime history with everything from a 2nd century seagoing ship to vessels packed with red bricks from the 1666 Great Fire rebuild. Now you might be wondering, can I hop on a boat and cruise by to see this sunken ship? Well, sorry to puncture your boat, but they're off limits. To keep them safe from overzealous tourists, the exact location is kept tightly under wraps, and visitations are limited, or almost forbidden. And speaking of wreckage sites that are forbidden, here's another voyage from the past. In 1629, the Batavia, a Dutch East India Company ship, wrecked off the Abrolhos Island in Western Australia. Bad day at sea? Sure. But what followed was straight up horror movie material. Around 100 passengers died instantly. The survivors scrambled to Beacon Island, but that was worse. There was no food, no water. Commander Pelsair took a lifeboat to get help, but his second in command, Geronimus Cornelis, a power-hungry lunatic, saw an opportunity. While Pelsair was away, Cornelis led a bloody mutiny, eliminating anyone who might oppose him. Over 100 people were murdered. It wasn't until months later that help finally returned. And let's just say, it wasn't a happy reunion. Cornelis and his goons were tried and hanged on the spot. Fast forward to 1963, when archaeologists located the wreck and started piecing together its gory past by studying the human remains and artifacts recovered from Beacon Island. Today, the wreck is a protected archaeological site. You can't dive there. But if it's any consolation, parts of the Batavia's hull and relics are on display at the Western Australia Museum. Close enough, right? But this isn't the only horror story found in the water. There's another that's just as haunting. Deep in the Belizean jungle is the Aktun Tunchil Mukna, a cave that feels like walking straight into a ghost story. For the ancient Maya people, it was a gateway to the underworld. Now, this wasn't some dark, echoey hole in the ground. It was a sacred site used for rituals, sacrifices, and offerings to the gods. And it shows. Scattered across the cave floor are ancient artifacts, pottery, tools, and the skeletal remains of those offered up, including the famous Crystal Maiden, whose bones now shimmer eerily thanks to centuries of mineral buildup. But here's the plot twist. Thanks to a few careless tourists, like one who dropped a camera on a 1,000-year-old skull, authorities had to step in. Large sections of the cave are now completely off limits, and general tourism is tightly restricted. So unless you're an archaeologist with special access, well, you'll be staying on the outside, squinting at the shadows through museum exhibits and YouTube documentaries. But there's another spooky location that people are kept away from because it's haunted. Most sites get locked down for safety, wear and tear, or political drama. But Bangara Fort in India? That's off limits because people swear it's haunted. This 16th century fortress was built by Raja Mandal Singh I, the younger brother of the King of Amber, in the 1570s. But the wild part about this palace is the superstitious backstory behind it. Legend says that a local princess, Ratnavati, was the target of a sorcerer's dark magic. To escape his curse, she supposedly caused his death, but not before he cursed the fort, leading to its eventual ruin. Even now, people hang on to the legend, believing that strange things happen once the sun goes down. Some tourists strongly believe they heard footsteps, whispers, and screams coming from the fort's abandoned buildings. So the government banned visits after sunset. But moving from scary sights, let's take a look at nature's wonder we sadly don't have access to. In America's history, the popular belief is that humans arrived around 13,000 years ago. That was until Cactus Hill came along and threw that theory out the window. Located on a sand dune above the Nottoway River, the site is named after the prickly pear cacti dotting the landscape. Discovered in the 80s, excavations revealed multiple cultural layers, including Clovis and pre-Clovis occupations. Artifacts found are dated between 15 and 16,000 years old. It's almost as old as the Ice Age. This challenged the Clovis first theory, suggesting humans arrived much earlier than believed. However, as important as this site is, you can't go snooping around for an excursion. It is strictly off limits to the public. Only authorized researchers are allowed in. A question that's puzzled a lot of people has been Stonehenge. Where are they from, and how in the world did these massive stones get there? But if you were hoping to walk up and touch them to satisfy your curiosity, well, think again. The gigantic stones are found in the Salisbury Plain, arranged in a pretty stunning circular formation, and have stood the test of time for over 4,000 years. People flocked to this site in the thousands, and the structure started suffering because of it. So in 1977, visitors were no longer allowed to go wandering around it. Ropes were also placed around the perimeter to stop anyone from getting too close. So now, you can only admire this ancient wonder from a distance. No touching allowed. If you've ever been fascinated by zebra stripes or the lines on your palm, wait till you see Peru's Nazca lines. It's almost like Earth showing off its own personal tattoo. From the ground, the lines don't look like much. But if you get a little altitude, say from a plane, your jaw will drop. That's exactly how they were first noticed. A pilot flying over the region spotted massive shapes carved into the desert floor. As it turns out, they were etched over 2,000 years ago by the pre-Inca Nazca people, who carefully scraped away red pebbles to reveal the lighter soil beneath. The result? Hundreds of giant geoglyphs, from clean geometric lines to massive animals, plants, and mythical beings. Naturally, conspiracy theories popped up, some saying it was likely alien landing strips. But then, as beautiful as the Nazca lines are, visitors are strictly banned from walking near them. The reason is rather simple. The soil is so fragile that even a few footprints could wreck the designs. So the best view is always from above. And well, that's kind of a win-win for everybody. That brings me to another view that's up above. Normally when it comes to burials, you hear 6 feet deep. But the ancient Chachapoya people of Peru thought, how about we do it differently? For them, the final resting place of warriors wasn't underground, it was the cliffside. And so, deep in the Andes lies the Los Pinchudos archaeological site, a cluster of wooden sarcophagi perched on a sheer rock face. These clay and stone tombs come with wooden roofs and bold paintwork in red, yellow, black, and white. And the name? It comes from some rather distinctive carvings of phalluses decorating the site. Somehow it meant something important back then. Now, before you lace up your hiking boots for a peek, don't. Any form of tourism is completely banned. Years of harsh weather and curious visitors have already taken a toll on the fragile structures. So, to protect what's left, the Peruvian government has shut down access to the area. Your only chance to admire these cliffside tombs, and their eyebrow-raising carvings, is through museum displays or the occasional documentary zoom-in. Here's another archaeological site with an interesting problem. Think Everest is the ultimate climbing challenge? Meet Mount Kailash, a 22,000-foot pyramid of ice that isn't just unclimbable, it's basically untouchable. For starters, 4 major religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon, believe this peak is the spiritual bullseye of the entire universe. For the Hindus, Shiva meditates there. For the Buddhists, it's a gateway to enlightenment, and pilgrims circle its base in a yearly ritual. For this reason, climbing it, forbidden. Full stop. Legend says the last brave soul to try, Yogi Milarepa, was assisted by the gods to achieve the climb. No other person has been able to make the climb. Then in 2001, a Spanish expedition tried, and promptly chickened out after locals warned of curses and divine smiting. Also, the mountain's extreme weather makes it dangerous, with sub-zero temperatures, high winds, and sudden snowstorms. But if that won't deter you, China enforced a strict taboo with icy resolve, preventing anyone from attempting to make the climb. So, with everything going on, bans, avalanches, storms, supernatural curses, Mount Kailash is practically a no-go area. Now let's look at one more underground cave you can't visit. In October 2019, crowds gathered at the base of Uluru, not for the usual tourist selfie, but to mark a final farewell. This wasn't just any visit. It was the last time climbers would be allowed to ascend the sacred rock. The Uluru Cave is a large sandstone monolith in Australia's Red Centre, and is deeply sacred to the Anangu, the Pitjantjatjara people. The caves carved into its surface aren't just natural formations, they hold ancient Aboriginal paintings, ancestral stories, and an unbroken cultural connection of over 60,000 years strong. Since the late 30s, Uluru had been a popular tourist destination, but in 2019 a ban was finally placed on civilians accessing it. It's not just about respect, it's about preserving a cultural heritage. Visitors are only allowed to look with reverence, but not dare trespass the sacred summit. In northern Spain's Cantabria region, the Altamira Cave holds its own ancient gallery of vivid prehistoric paintings. But visiting it? That's no longer an option. Back in 2002, scientists realized that human breath, specifically again carbon dioxide, was damaging ancient art. Green mold had already begun creeping over the cave walls, threatening to wipe away the legacy left behind thousands of years ago. Access was shut down immediately. A brief exception came in 2014 when the cave was reopened under strict conditions. Only 5 people were randomly selected and allowed just 37 minutes each inside. After that, locked again. Earlier in 2010, there were plans to reopen it, but by December of that year, Spain's Ministry of Culture scrapped the idea altogether, and it remained permanently closed. The verdict was clear. Modern humans and ancient masterpieces just aren't compatible. So this archaeological site is forbidden from anyone to enter. Now, here's a very interesting case. Ever wondered what the Court of Kings in the Iron Age looked like? Dun Ellené in Ireland might give you a solid idea, but it's too bad it's off limits to the public. So what's the deal with this place? Well, it was the Gaelic royal site, once the home of kings. Think of it as the VIP lounge for kings and chiefs. It was a major ceremonial and political hub in Gaelic Ireland. The site has been excavated since 1968, revealing structures and evidence of royal life. But it wasn't just for royalty. It seems to have been occupied during the spring and summer months with signs of cooking, including bones from cows, sheep, pigs, deer, and even horses. Today, the whole site sits on private farmland and is closed off to visitors. But there's a catch. If there are cattle roaming the hill, you'll have to wait it out because of difficulty accessing the site. But if they're not around, you can ask the landowners for permission to stroll around. Who knows? When you hear waterfall, your brain probably pictures water tumbling down, right? But horizontal falls in Western Australia decided to flip the script. Here, the water flows sideways, all thanks to the powerful tides getting squeezed through 2 narrow gorges. It's such a beautiful natural spectacle that some even call it one of the greatest wonders of the natural world. But even the most beautiful places can turn deadly. On May 27, 2022, just after 7 a.m., a tourist boat called the Falls Express slammed into a rock wall. It had 28 people on board. Chaos followed. 6 aircraft were dispatched and 18 people were flown out with injuries ranging from head trauma to broken bones. Now, authorities are planning to ban tourists from passing through the narrow gaps entirely. Just hearing about this place got me excited. An ocean actually rushing sideways? So sad I might not ever get to see it in person. And that's a wrap for today. But before you go, here's a little trivia. What massive underground city in Turkey was discovered in the 60s and could house up to 20,000 people? A. Troy. B. Derinkuyu. C. Ephesus. Or D. Cappadocia? Drop your answers in the comments below. So those archaeological sites were fascinating. Sacred sites, ancient relics, and forbidden zones. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. Now, let's crack open 100 historical facts that are still so hard to believe. Like the fact that the first thing sold on the internet was weed, or that some Civil War soldiers had glowing wounds that helped them heal faster. You do not want to miss this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Kira, come here. Kira also says goodbye. See you next time, right? Kisses? Nope. Okay. Bye. Ah.